So the next issue I want to talk about is it's really old. This was a story a long time ago, but it's still really important because it's important in the sense that the technology is out there, not necessarily that it's important for this particular story or this particular thing that came up weeks and weeks ago that most people aren't really thinking about anymore. It's still an issue in the world, and we should continue to have it somewhat in the forefront of our minds concerning our privacy, and our right against being surveilled. Okay, so many weeks ago, I think it's probably 2 3 months now. There was a revelation about an organization called the NSO Group, and the NSO Group is an Israel-based intelligence service that creates a software called Pegasus. And Pegasus essentially is a software that takes over someone's phone and transmits lots of information to whoever it is who's requested it. Now, the thing that is very scary about Pegasus in particular is that you actually don't need to click on anything for Pegasus to infect your phone. Someone simply just needs to send you something with Pegasus in it and will take over your entire phone. So usually the way these types of things work is, and I'm sure you've heard what phishing is, but if you haven't, just let me explain briefly. So essentially, someone sends you a suspicious looking email with a link in it or an attachment to open or something like that. And it just kind of looks wrong. But oftentimes these have things like urgent timelines, or they're supposedly from people who you should trust. So you'll see some from UPS, you'll see some from the post office, you'll see some supposedly from governments, you'll see some from political candidates, you'll see some from like, if so in the corporate sense, you'll see them from like your CEO or HR generally or whatever. So these messages are meant to confuse you, and they're meant to confuse you and trick you into opening either a link or an attachment. And what this does is your clicking on that allows the hacker to get into your computer or phone or what have you and take it over. This is usually how phishing works. And essentially, they're after information of yours, but they just are trying to trick you to give it to them or to give some version of it to them or give them the access to find it on their own. Okay. And this data is then resold in the black market, and that's how this is a profitable venture. Okay. So just if you didn't know what phishing was, that's what phishing is, generally speaking. Now, the thing that it makes NSO Group's Pegasus software much more dangerous than that is because the Pegasus software itself does not actually require you to do anything. As long as someone sends it to your phone, that's it, game over. Your whole phone is compromised. It can listen to everything you're saying. It can take pictures of you without your permission. For example, if you're looking at your phone and you're scrolling and you have a front-facing camera, just for example, right? It can snap a picture of you and send that out of your phone without you ever knowing. Okay? It can see every keystroke you do, so all your passwords gone, forget about it. It can read your screen, say you open your banking app, it knows everything about your banking app. If you look at your routing number or your account number for some reason, it can take screenshots and send it to someone else. It can track everyone you call, everyone you text, the contents of those calls and text messages, can track your voicemails, everything. Everything that your phone does, it has access to and can send to someone else. Now, this is obviously very scary all by itself. To make matters worse, when Pegasus and NSO, when NSO Group's Pegasus was revealed to the world stage as being problematic, one of the things that was particularly problematic is that governments were using this to spy on other governments. It was also being used to spy on journalists. Famously, or perhaps infamously, Jamal Khashoggi's phone was infected with Pegasus very shortly before he was assassinated in the Turkish embassy by Saudi butchers. Okay, so you get a sense of how worrying this can be, because essentially someone can know everything about you. They can use it to trace you, and in the case of Jamal Khashoggi, it can be used to kill you. So obviously this is very dangerous, and it turned out that many governments were surveilling each other as well. So there was a large leak of classified information from the NSO Group showing that different countries were spying on the personal cell phones of different leaders around the world. And you might not care about that because, screw them or whatever, and leaders, whatever. But the thing is, it was also being used to track journalists. Al Jazeera, I believe, reported that many of their journalists were being tracked using Pegasus software. Jamal Khashoggi, I mentioned already. But journalists from around the world are being targeted by this without even knowing. So this is obviously very dangerous. Now, some people might say, hey, the solution is to use encrypted messaging apps and things like that in order to send your messages. That's where you're wrong, kiddo, because the Pegasus software, it doesn't need to break into your app. As soon as you open that app on your screen, it can take a screenshot of everything. It sees what you see. It's not worried about coming through the network and hacking into your phone necessarily in the way that it might try to do if it was trying to interpret an encrypted message being sent from your phone. That's not the point. It is on your phone. It's just sending the stuff that your phone can see. And by the way, it can do all this when your phone is in its lock screen or the screen is turned off. Now, I don't actually know for sure if it has any power over your phone, if your phone is turned as it has the power turned off. I would imagine it probably doesn't, but who knows? I mean, if your phone, instead of actually turning off, uses some level of hibernation or some level of low level battery life to allow you to turn it on at a moment's notice or to give you, I don't know, a little screen or something that shows you're charging or whatever, if it uses some amount of power, then Pegasus might be able to use your phone even when it's turned off. So that part I don't know. It's pure speculation. But regardless, you can see where this is very problematic. And this is problematic for journalists, it's problematic for activists, because essentially what's happening now is without your consent, illegally, without you having to do anything, anyone who has your contact information of any way, shape, or form that you can open on your phone can infect your phone without you doing anything. And truthfully, so I have a lot to say about this after I've already said a lot about this. First and foremost, NSO should be shut down. Pegasus shouldn't exist, right? This type of ability to spy on people without their consent, like we talked about in the Clearview story just a moment ago, is completely ridiculous. It chills speech, it chills behavior, and honestly, this is a giant fishing expedition because if you're not doing anything wrong, in theory, you're fine. But the problem is, if you slip up even once, your phone is likely on you, right? So the second you do something that is risque or scandalous or outside the norm, so say for example, you have a strange kink or a kink that is not shared, a sexual desire or pleasure or whatever that's not shared by large portions of the population. It's just whatever it has to be. Use your imagination, okay? So what if you're doing that and your phone is on you and or your phone is somewhere and the audio of this sex act or video even worse is taken of you doing this or your messages talking about doing this with someone else are leaked to the public, right? It could change your whole life. It could make you unemployable. It could make you a pariah, right? Especially if you're in public life. So that's kind of an extreme example, but there are lots of ways where this can be really problematic. So honestly, the best thing to do with it is to get rid of it. It's the same argument that non-proliferation activists make, which is we shouldn't have nuclear weapons because one nuke, it allows for other nukes to come out, and always keeps the pressure there that a nuke will eventually be used. This is more or less the same thing. You should think of Pegasus as a surveillance nuke. Now that one country, and by the way, we kind of saw that being true, right? Once one country was able to buy it, other countries were able to buy it, and they were able to use it on whoever they wanted. So now is the argument to say, well, everyone should have Pegasus and everyone should be able to spy on everyone as long as they have some way to get a touch of them. And the answer is obviously no, you should not do that. Not only is that incredibly dangerous, but if we value each other at all as individuals and recognize that we have private lives, this is a total infringement on that concept of ourselves. This is partially about our personhood, right? What makes us who we are is partially made up of the things that we do when no one's looking. And by the way, we should be allowed to do things when no one is looking. There should not be a constant threat that anything we do, anytime we do it, is being surveilled by someone else. Now, for those in the American context, they might say, well, my phone pretty much tracks everything I do anyway. Fair enough. But this is different because that you can get around, right? You can disable some of these services. You can, you can log off Facebook for the last time. You can quit Instagram. You can quit TikTok. You can, turn your data off and your Wi-Fi off and just use your phone for calling, right? There are ways you can get around some of this. You can only use encrypted messaging apps on your computer as opposed to on your phone, right? There are some ways that you can get around what's going on here. But with Pegasus, you lose that ability because essentially your phone is no longer your own. And anything you do while your phone is on you, near you, or what have you, is just totally gone. And okay, so maybe the solution is a burner phone. Okay, good thought. But even a burner phone can get Pegasus on it because Pegasus does not require you to have any particular hardware or software to use it. It just takes over the whole phone. So anything that you do with that phone can be tracked. So you see where this is obviously essentially endless, right? The amount of spying that can be done on you is essentially endless with Pegasus. So at the end of the day, the best solution, in my opinion, is to just get rid of it. So essentially, the whole point of this segment was to kind of tell you a little bit about NSO Group and Pegasus and about privacy rights and how a lot of our mobile data can get tracked back to us, even if we don't think it can, right? So we just need to be careful. Even if you're not a socialist and you're watching this, think really carefully about how you interact with your phone, how you interact with, you know, the world around you in terms of digital media and technology and stuff. If you're not comfortable putting something out there, don't do it. If you're not comfortable, if you're worried about what your phone might track you doing while you're doing something, leave your phone at home, right? There are ways to get around this, but it becomes increasingly difficult because the ways that we can be surveilled are also evolving. So we have to think about this in a kind of a cost benefit analysis thing, a cost benefit analysis framework where we think about, is it worth having our phone for this particular activity given what can possibly be tracked about us, right? And for most of the things that we do on a daily basis, it's not going to matter, right? But now that you know that this is something that can be done to you, just be vigilant. I wish I had a better way to cap this segment other than just, hey, you know, be vigilant and be careful. But the truth is, while software like this exists and there are people who are trying to develop more powerful versions of this software, we just have to be careful until we can pass laws to make this type of processing illegal, both by corporations but also by governments. Because the truth is, one of the things that was scary about this revelation about NSO Group was that governments were using it to spy on each other and themselves, and even other people within their own government. So obviously, this is bananas. We need to make sure that something like this doesn't exist. We need to make sure that something like this cannot exist in the future because we do not want to live in a dystopian nightmare where everything we do is monitored and everything we do can be held against us at any given time, regardless of how private or out of context that act is construed.